Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We had a couple of technical difficulties, and we also are Susie's dealing with a situation where she's looking after someone. So she's going to be off camera for a little while, at least for the first hour. And I just published my article on our previous findings from the last few streams. I only got up to partway through stream the Decipher episode 11 and 12. So I hope that you all like it, and I'm going to actually run through a few of the points that I made in that article. It may have a couple of edits, like if I spot a typo or something, my apologies, and I will update it as I can in the next few hours after the stream. But I was just really excited to share this article with you all, and I wanted to publish it before we streamed. So it's just a few minutes old, and we're going to take a look. I'm going to share a screen in a moment and just read through with you. And thank you again for joining us. We know it's been a bit of a rocky, holiday season, but life happens. All right. Okay, so the title of the article is Snowden Files Provide New Insight on the NSA and the Power it Wields. And before I continue, I'd like to say that if you go to Twitter and type in @Elizabeth Lee, Lea Voss, VOS, you'll see my profile. Just follow me if you want, but basically the article is there. And also it's also at the Twitter profile, the handle @Disobedient News. So if you're trying to find the article, you can also just Google Disobedient Media and it should be the first article on the site. So in the first little paragraph, I'm just explaining that, that Suzie and I work together on this Decipher project, and that, together we've analyzed over 100 documents from batch 4. And then obviously Suzie's analyzed hundreds and hundreds of documents before that. So that I'm explaining that this is a continuation specifically on batch 4, and that it's not finished, but that I'm presenting some of the findings that we have so far. And I just dove right into it, and I started speaking about the NSA's definition of denial and deception. This is one of the chronologically earliest findings that we looked at that was significant. And it was just the fact that they actually give their definition of these terms, because we couldn't really find this anywhere else. And because it was also interesting to us because denial is labeled secret while deception is labeled unclassified. And then we went on to talk about the Office of Target Pursuit. And again, this is an early finding, but it's important because it's difficult to find definitions of these terms. And they're also sometimes new terms. I remember that as I was listening to the stream, it was really helpful that somebody actually provided us the PDF that talked about what this exactly means. And the PDF happened to be from the PDF happened to be from the WikiLeaks document. Okay. So basically, I stated that the Snowden file read in part, after completing a 6-month tour, interns chose 2 additional tours from S2 target offices, the Target Analysis Center, Cryptologic and Exploitation Services, SIG development elements, including the Office of Target Pursuit and the Network Analysis Center. With the help of a viewer, we were able to find definitions in regards to the initial WikiLeaks file that explained these definitions. And then I just have...
I'm just going to get Crash. Hey, I am actually here. I'm just going to hang out and talk to you guys in chat and send a few more tweets than normal. As Elizabeth explained, I'm actually looking after someone who's sick at the moment. I'm sorry. So that's why I'm not on video at the moment, but I am here. So if you want to talk to me or ask me questions, you're welcome to. I'm dying to see Elizabeth's new article. I knew that she was writing something, but I actually haven't got to read it yet. Because it's only just come out a couple of minutes ago. But Elizabeth, will you please read us the article?
Okay, I get embarrassed and whatnot, but
bedtime story.
Sure, I'll try. I'll start from the top.
Yeah, but nice and slow as well, because both you and I have funny accents, like for the Americans to listen
Yeah,
to.
no, I totally understand. And plus, yeah, when I'm writing, I'm always trying to skip ahead a few moments to catch if I have a typo or if I've misworded something. So that's another reason that I
Sure.
rush. But
Yeah, Cockatoo, actually, the Cockatoo is an awesome proofreader. That I'm not sure if he's here tonight, but hopefully.
well, in future, I will, on Snowden documents, I may actually take advantage of that because proofreading is always helpful. So I'll just start from the beginning. And I've already spoken about the title a little bit. It was, like I said, it was really difficult to choose a title for an article this broad that talks about so many different individual topics. Okay, so starting from the beginning. New Zealand Internet Party leader Suzie Dawson and this author have continued to analyze Snowden files that have so far never received public scrutiny. Disobedient Media previously reported on findings stemming from Batch 3 of the Intercept's Snowden file archives. Dawson and this author have analyzed over 100 documents from the Intercept's Batch 4 of the Snowden files to date, and have noted numerous items of key significance revealed in the never-before publicized data. The collaboration under the title Decipher U will continue until sometime in early 2018. A selected group of our findings is presented here, with the rest of Batch 4 findings to be discussed at a later date. One of the first documents in Batch 4 discussed the NSA's definition of denial and deception. The document advertises a seminar which would be presented by Dr. Larry Gershwin, the National Intelligence Officer for Intelligence Assurance and Chairman of the Foreign Denial and Deception Committee, FDDC. The description of Gershwin's presentation reads in part, secret, denial, methods and means of protecting state and military secrets and of preventing or impairing U.S. intelligence collection and analysis that targets those secrets. And then deception, which was unclassified. Measures designed to mislead by manipulation, distortion, or falsification of evidence to induce the U.S. to react in a manner prejudicial to its interests. And the other, and I'm adding a side note here, one of the reasons that I didn't get to write down here, one of the reasons that this was significant as Suzie and I were reading through documents is because we assume that although these definitions are describing basically defensive, like what other states or entities are doing to the US, we assume that they are also applying these methods aggressively to other states and entities. So it was useful in understanding how the NSA operates. Dawson noted that while the definition of denial was marked secret, the description of deception was marked unclassified. And then we're moving on to another finding that deals with definitions. Another finding of interest from episode 10 of Decipher U was in regards to the definition of the Office of Target Pursuit. This Snowden file that we looked at read in part, after completing a 6-month tour in a TOPI, and I'll have to ask Suzie later what that means actually, because I have no idea. Interns chose 2 additional tours from the S2 target offices.
The target office of primary interest.
Okay, that makes sense. I now remember you talking about that. The abbreviations kill me in these documents. So the Target Analysis Center, Cryptologic and Exploitation Services, SIGDEV elements, including the Office of Target Pursuit, there's that, and the Network Analysis Center. With the help of a viewer, and I spoke about this before, we were able to find definitions of these terms in a file from a WikiLeaks PDF document. And then I provide a screenshot of that file, which describes PRISM as an heir in one sense to a history of intelligence alliances within as many as 100 trusted US companies since the 1970s. The NSA calls these special source operations, and PRISM falls under that rubric. And so and this kind of historical background was new for me, and so I thought it was really useful, and that's why I included it. The document states that special source operations oversee, and I should have written oversee, not overseas, oversees PRISM, the PRISM program, one of the most infamous examples of mass surveillance revealed by the publication of the Snowden files. The Washington Post and other outlets have reported extensively on PRISM. And it is, side note, it is absolutely the biggest, most well-documented takeaway soundbite from the Snowden files. And part of the reason that Suzie and I are covering these unreported documents is to show and explore the fact that there are other issues and other important information in addition to the PRISM program and mass surveillance in these files that should be looked at. So returning to the text. The Verge describes the program. PRISM is a tool used by the US National Security Agency to collect private electronic data belonging to users of major internet services like Gmail, Facebook, Outlook, and others. It's the latest evolution of the US government's post-9/11 electronic surveillance efforts, which began under President Bush with the Patriot Act and expanded to include Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, enacted in 2007 and 2006 and 2007. I wrote, while PRISM is a relatively recent development, special source operations are decades older. And then I provide another screenshot from the WikiLeaks document describing PRISM in relation to special source operations. And if you're reading the article along with me, you can actually click on those images and it'll take you in a new page to the original WikiLeaks PDF. And the little screenshot reads, like market researchers, but with far more privileged access, collection managers in the NSA's Special Source Operations Group, which oversees the PRISM program, are drawn to the wealth of information about their subjects in online accounts. For much the same reason, civil libertarians and some ordinary users may be troubled by the menu available to analysts who hold the required clearances to task the PRISM system. There has been continued exponential growth in tasking to Facebook and Skype, according to the PRISM slides. With a few clicks and an affirmation that the subject is believed to be engaged in terrorism, espionage, or nuclear proliferation, an analyst obtains full access to Facebook's extensive search and surveillance capabilities against the variety of online social networking services. And then I move on to another document which revealed that the US does indeed intervene militarily in order to secure the flow of oil to the US and its allies. And I know that this is a bit of a jump from the whole PRISM and special source operations topic, but this is just a very wide-ranging, it's a collection of our findings. And so that's just how that goes. The admission was made in a file relating to a seminar called African Petropolitics. The document reads that, in part, that by 2015, the United States will depend on West African oil for 25% of its oil imports. Oil production in Sudan has been a factor in the Sudanese civil war, with oil wealth sharing becoming a primary negotiating issue in the peace process. Oil has played a role in the extent of corruption and in sustaining military might in several African countries. And then I bolded to highlight this next passage, which reads, finally, threats to and security of the oil-producing areas in West Africa will be discussed, including US engagement to improve security. And then I wrote, this afterthought in the description of a petropolitics seminar is particularly relevant in light of the recent deaths of US service members in African countries. News of their death struck a chord of dismay in much of the American public, who were largely caught off guard at the news that the US was active in African nations. Reuters noted in October this year that US deaths in Niger highlighted military mission creep in the continent, writing, the deaths shine a light on Washington's increasingly aggressive special forces led counterterrorism strategy in Africa and its risk of casualties. The Washington Post described the incident as indicative of a shadow war. The influence of oil and concerns surrounding the security of the flow of oil in the decision-making process behind such missions are often less left out of such reports, but are nakedly and outright stated in the NSA documents. The concept of war for oil is not new, with legacy press outlets, including CNN, readily reporting the admission of military leaders that the Iraq War was based on securing oil interests. The NSA's admission that conflicts are entered into in order to benefit oil flow, in plain words, adds corroboration to such admissions, which were at one time dismissed as speculation. Another significant document in this author's collaboration with Decipher in the Decipher Ustream was that the NSA, I should reword that, was that the NSA routinely outsourced network security, and that the NSA showed very little concern for defensive security measures to protect their data. And a lot of the content in this passage in the article is based on the explanation that Suzie gave to me, because I learned a lot from her speaking about these various elements of network security that are totally lacking so far to date in the NSA documents that we and that Suzie has analyzed. I wrote, concern for catastrophic security breaches is not shown in the hundreds of documents Dawson has analyzed thus far, dating up to late 2004. Dawson discussed the way in which improper data breaches by foreign states, terrorist organizations, or other entities should have been a major concern for the NSA. This notable lack of concern for security and potential security breaches was especially ominous, Dawson explained, given the increased number of people who were given access to sensitive material thanks to the NSA's use of corporate outsourcing. She said, transferring data across corporate networks, as they expand the pool of who can receive data, all of that has security implications. So they're opening more and more and more and more breach points, proprietary networks, and it's impossible to secure it if they are using corporate parties and having to go through their support channels. It's insane. Dawson stated that the NSA might have assumed that their systems were essentially bulletproof, adding, if Hewlett-Packard types are responsible for network security, God help the NSA. I really enjoyed Suzie's explanation of this issue. Dawson added that even denial and deception documents did not address network-wide compromises, leaks, or breaches from another state. However, some documents illustrate preparation for disaster recovery in case of real-world disasters like hurricanes, tornadoes, and the like. It should be noted that disaster recovery is totally separate from network security, and that the presence of one variety of preparedness only serves to highlight the utter lack of regard for the other. And the only reference to such concern was mentioned in the discussion of the fact that if a breach occurred, Congress was to be notified. So their concern for security breaches was more in how to explain it to Congress than to actually prevent it. While the NSA appears to have largely ignored network security, multiple documents Dawson analyzed described offensive hacking tactics. In light of the numerous breaches of insecurity that have taken place over the years since these documents were penned, one hopes that a concern for data security has manifested since 2004. And then the conversation in that particular stream moved on to executive accessibility and the open door policy that we saw that was emphasized in a lot of different documents that we looked at, and the fact that executive accessibility sort of created a veneer of openness, but the reality was that people like Snowden who would raise serious objections were policed and silenced. Dawson remarked that many of the NSA documents emphasized executive accessibility, while simultaneously executives were shown to employ an amnesiac approach to their role. She used the example of Snowden's attempt to raise constitutional issues resulting from mass surveillance as an example of the type of dangerous self-policing groupthink that can occur in environments that extol the virtues of executive accessibility, but also punish those who bring up serious questions. Dawson said, the function of corporatism is to create a veneer of executive accessibility, but to discourage employees from asking hard questions. An additional Snowden interview titled Snowden file interview titled Interview with Jim Cusick, SID Assistant Deputy Director for Data Acquisition, provided insight into the mindset of the leaders operating within the NSA in concert with figures like Michael Hayden. Cusick states in the interview, I let it be known to NSA leadership that I was willing to take on virtually any task as long as it was in the middle of the fray, it was challenging, and it made a difference. Being a senior operations officer in NSOC has to rank as the best job in SIGINT by orders of magnitude. Heading up unconventional operations and managing the NSA's largest budget category was the hardest and most demanding job I ever took on. Representing Lieutenant General Hayden at the Pentagon during the aftermath of 9/11 and Operation Iraqi Freedom was fascinating and added a whole new perspective on support to the warfighter and national tactical integration. So I looked up Cusick, and there's actually very little on him, surprising or unsurprising. There were zero news articles referencing him, but there was additional documentation regarding Cusick's role at the NSA, which revealed that James M. Cusick, Assistant Deputy Director of the NSA Data Acquisition, they called him Mr. Data Acquisition. He's the specialist in charge of building collection systems that can acquire vast amounts of data. And his unit is the one that is running this program. To the best of my knowledge, and they were quoting a intelligence source on this, and I believe he had a name. I forget the name right now, but if you click the link, it'll show you. To the best of my knowledge, in the 5 years in which the program has been running, it has not caught a single person. So that Cusick described his values in NSA documents as, quote, willing to participate in virtually anything so long as the task was in the middle of the fray, it was challenging and made a difference, is concerning given his participation in the illegal mass surveillance of American citizens that has reportedly not delivered enough actionable intelligence to deliver a single person, suggesting that mass surveillance is not intended to address terrorism and national security so much as it is to monitor and effectively control the public. Snowden's take on the illegality of mass surveillance practice, and I just linked his tweet relatively recently. He says, mass surveillance was never classified to save lives. It was classified because the government knew if a real court ruled on it, they would declare it unconstitutional. Since 2013, they have again and again. And then he links a Reuters article on a German court ruling that against foreign intelligence and mass surveillance. And then I wrote that former technical director William Binney has been a longtime critic of the NSA's mass surveillance activities. His criticism of the practice is especially important because he helped create the program, but was horrified to later learn that the system he had developed was used against American citizens in a vast domestic spying program. Binney's resignation in protest of domestic mass surveillance came years before the publication of the Snowden files. The issue of domestic surveillance, as described in the Snowden documents, has been thoroughly publicized by various outlets. However, the ready willingness of individuals such as James Cusick, a major figure in the NSA's data acquisition program, to betray legal and ethical principles as openly stated in the unreported Snowden documents creates a sharp contrast with the moral and constitutional stance shown by figures like Binney. And Suzie commented during our stream that at one point that during our discussions that a little discussed factor in the current neo-McCarthyist hysteria and obsession with Russia may stem from the fact that the country took in Edward Snowden despite the US and Western nations' desire to apprehend him. Dawson said, if you're, quote, if you're on the shit list of the US empire, the Western mafia, Russia is one of the few countries that you can go to and still live and work. So far, all of this is a huge vendetta against Russia for providing safe refuge for whistleblowers. Pardon me. Snowden has often spoken of the double standard employed against dissidents who speak out against the wrongs of Western nations and allies in comparison with the large outpouring of support from Western NGOs and humanitarian groups in response to activists and whistleblowers originating in states opposed by the West and their allies. And this includes countries like Iran and Russia. A further issue that Dawson and this author noted during the analysis of the multiple unreported Snowden documents was the collaborative interaction between various intelligence agencies. This is significant because it works against the commonly held perception of Snowden as publishing NSA data due to an animosity between the agencies. And we've spoken about this in multiple streams. Dawson noted that the content of the Snowden files did not support such an interpretation. Instead, they revealed a revolving door between the agencies and the large extent to which the various agencies were interdependent, providing necessary services for each other. This is significant because it goes against the framing of Snowden's release of NSA documents as the culmination of a rivalry between the CIA and NSA. The agencies are so intertwined that they deploy employees and establish offices within other agencies to handle specific issues relating to their specialization. Much of the content revealed in Snowden's documents reveals information that would harm the overall interests of the CIA much more than the agency would benefit from the wounded reputation of the NSA. Overall, Dawson and this author concluded in our analysis of the documents that it is highly unlikely that the CIA had any part in Snowden's decision to leak NSA information. The CIA is also an important customer of the NSA. And this whole relationship of the NSA as a money-making sort of corporation in the way that it sees itself, and the NSA's discussion in its own documents of customers and intelligence products was a new revelation to me after beginning collaborating with Suzie in Decipher use streams. I had no idea that that's the way they thought about their role. One of the numerous documents that discuss the interdependence between the NSA and CIA was the file from Batch 4 titled CIA's Directorates, Understanding More About Them. The document describes the collaboration between the CIA's Directorate of Intelligence, which is abbreviated to DI, and the NSA's Signals Intelligence, SIGINT. The file reads, although there is certainly collaboration between CIA, DI's, and analytic community and the NSA's SIGINT analysts, the CIA is mostly a SIGINT customer, using finished NSA product as one of the most valuable sources in producing all-source intelligence products. That the CIA is an important customer for the NSA further suggests that the CIA would be unlikely to damage the NSA through the release of documents like those leaked by Edward Snowden, and adds to the conclusion that Snowden is indeed an unbiased whistleblower. And so I wanted to address that. I was tempted to write an entire article on that subject, but I thought that I should at least include it in a summary of our findings. The same document goes on to describe the interdependence of the CIA and NSA regarding the CIA's Directorate of Operations and the NSA's Signals Intelligence Directorate. The file reads, there are many examples of DO and SID partnerships with HUMINT and SIGINT enabling each other. The file goes on to describe the various directorates of the NSA and CIA and their customer-supplier relationship, as well as their interdependence and joint efforts. It reads, some joint CIA-NSA efforts, which actually include people from across the CIA directorates and SID organizations, offer the best examples of how these two agencies can work well together. The Special Collection Service, SCS, is a joint NSA-CIA organization whose mission is the covert collection of SIGINT from official U.S. establishments abroad. The clandestine SIGINT program, ClanSig, run by the Jointly Staffed Technology Management Office, TMO, at the CIA, provides numerous examples of HUMINT enabling SIGINT and vice versa. Suzie Dawson compared the relationship between these agencies as to the concept of the left hand and the right hand of the same body. And I think that the documents absolutely show that over and over again. And this is just a couple of examples of that type of relationship. Further documents illustrated the revolving door between the NSA and CIA, as well as the corporate sector. A file titled Perspectives from a Summer Intern stated, he worked at a wide variety of stops in this public sector, including a tour as the deputy director at the CIA, and later served in executive positions for private sector companies. And when the Huffington Post spoke with William Binney, he had stated his belief that the NSA's dragnet surveillance practices were used by the FBI for the express purpose of protecting big banking interests. This statement is particularly relevant in the discussion of an NSA document that shows meddling in foreign banking institutions. Although The Intercept reported on this particular file, the outlet's coverage of the information amounted to one paragraph and failed to discuss key questions raised by the agency's self-professed interference in foreign banks. The document in question, titled Crash Team, states, one key to the crash team's success has been its access to North Korean financial transaction data routed through foreign banks, a lucrative source for intelligence production and SIGINT development, SIGDEV, efforts. The document continues, in order to curtail North Korea's banking presence in Europe, targeted financial institutions as collection targets in their own right. This revealed several instances of their complicity in North Korea's efforts to avoid scrutiny of its activities. And then I spoke about this file, and I said that signal intelligence would directly target European banking institutions is a revelation that deserves coverage in its own right, and proved a major topic of discussion during Decipher analysis with Suzie Dawson, who said, this shows that even big banksters can be targeted if it's politically expedient for them to be. As Dawson and I discussed, the Crash Team file raises serious questions about the NSA's power over banks and financial institutions, both domestically and internationally. Dawson described the significant questions raised by the revelation that the NSA had interfered with foreign banks. The NSA spying on the commercial sector is probably much more rampant than we typically hear about. The next question is, what are they doing with that information? The power of that information is unbelievable. They are collecting the strategic planning documents of those entities, knowing what they are going to do ahead of time. The capacity to act on that ahead of time is phenomenal. It is the power not just to respond punitively to what has happened, or to what is happening, but to respond to what will happen, alter that future, and prevent it from happening. An additional document discussed during the Decipher live streams listed a number of entities and institutions who are customers of the NSA's intelligence product. The file, titled The Washington Liaison Office, who are those guys, lists the Federal Reserve banking system as a customer of the NSA, among other entities. And I just included a screenshot of the bullet point list. The document also states, and I'll just read out the name of these entities that are customers of the NSA. It includes the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Transportation, the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, the Export-Import Bank, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Reserve System, and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The document also states, the Washington Liaison Office customers usually have competing priorities totally unknown to each other, requiring a delicate balancing act in providing timely SIGINT to all. For example, what the Secretary of Agriculture needs for her afternoon meeting with EU representatives is completely different from what the NSA administrator needs prior to his visit to India. Again, serious questions arise from the fact that the Federal Reserve Bank is not a government entity, yet is able to buy intelligence services from the NSA. This raises the obvious concern as to what varieties of services the Federal Reserve Bank buys from the NSA and for what purpose this intelligence is used. The document's description of its customers', quote, competing priorities implies an incredibly delicate and potentially disastrous amount of power held by the NSA. From the agency's track record in terms of both legality and ethics, this document raises serious concern. An additional file titled Conference on GSM Collection in Iraq, which has not been previously discussed by media outlets, indicated that as far back as 2004, simply being in a targeted geographical location was enough to cause the NSA to surveil handsets. The file iterates that a profile was created to include only the calls that were made near 27 known heroin processing labs in the country. When run against available metadata, the program produced a list of the handsets that were used in the targeted area. The top 20 handsets were then tasked for collection, and at least one has produced reportable intelligence. This is significant because it shows that of the 20 surveilled handsets, the majority produced no actionable data. Dawson pointed out that the issue of collecting data on random people physically present at domestically targeted events, including protests, could be comparable to the geographically determined spying shown in the document. Dawson discussed that in such examples, even those who were not protesting but happened to be in the physical vicinity of the protest, such as shopkeepers, passers-by, etc., would be targeted in such an instance, illustrating the pervasiveness of intrusive mass surveillance. The NSA, This is a mistake I'll have to fix. I included a heading that I didn't intend to. But the NSA file titled Big Changes at the US Mission to the United Nations, USUN, proved exceptionally noteworthy. It provided key insight into the NSA's role at the UN and the agency's self-concept regarding its influence in the lead up to the Iraq War. The file also illustrated the influence of the United States in crafting narratives that would drive decision-making at the UN. While Dawson and this author read the document, we were prompted to research a number of secondary sources, including George W. Bush's speech to the UN in 2002. The NSA admits that the agency participated in crafting Bush's speech for the purpose of garnering support for the war in Iraq, as well as using as many UN resources as possible for the conflict. I should have reworded that. Apologies. In light of the weapons of mass destruction argument Bush employed during the UN speech, crafted in part by the NSA, Dawson raised the issue of the suspicious death of Weapons Director Inspector Dr. David Kelly. The BBC reported on Kelly's death, stating that he had been outed as a possible source of a report that cast doubt on the government's claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction capable of being deployed within 45 minutes. The BBC wrote that soon after the controversy erupted, Kelly was found dead in Woodland a few miles from his Oxfordshire home after apparently taking his own life. The US and the NSA described the desire to use UN infrastructure for the US agenda. The document brags about the NSA's success in crafting global narrative regarding the war in Iraq and the UN's support for the conflict. The document also describes our very own NSA representative to the USUN, and the name is redacted, had announced not only the August 2004 end of his 3-year assignment, but also his retirement from federal service in early September. Yeah, and Suzie and I discussed the fact that the NSA has a representative of the agency which interfaces directly with the USUN is troubling. And personally, I was totally unaware prior to that particular stream that the NSA, that the intelligence agencies had a direct interface with the UN in this way. That was new to me. Dawson described the report as the NSA's implicit admission that it controls the UN. She also noted that the weapons of mass destruction argument for the war, according to the NSA document, originated with SIGINT intelligence provided by the NSA. Effectively, the NSA is taking credit in the file for the WMD narrative that helped initiate the US's involvement in one of the longest, most devastating, and costliest wars in history. By 2013, Reuters reported that the war in Iraq had cost over $2 trillion. The Huffington Post reports that over 500,000 Iraqi civilians had died during the conflict to date. And that, I believe that was a couple of years ago as well. It may have been 2016. I would have to check. That the NSA would claim responsibility for the narrative that led to one of the most costly conflicts in history makes it truly one of the most destructive forces the planet has ever seen. Dawson commented that the NSA's admission suggested the agency has taken part in constructing narratives and aiding in the creation of UN resolutions for decades. And this is confirmed because the document reads, as the US mounted a strategic response to these attacks, which is in reference to 9/11, and worked with the UN to garner world support for the global war on terrorism, SIGINT proved vital in the US negotiations that resulted in 2 key and unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq. SIGINT also contributed to the composition of the US President's speech at the UN General Assembly in September of 2002, and to Secretary Powell's presentation to the Security Council on the case against Iraq, the Iraq dictator, among other events. SIGINT also helped USUN and state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan, countless peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, Sudan, and so many other situations. And this document and that passage in the document is critical in that it shows the NSA outright stating that its signals intelligence influenced US negotiations that resulted in 2 key and unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq. Essentially, the NSA is taking responsibility for helping plunge the world into the most one of the most protracted, costly, and devastating conflicts in history. And then I have a picture of Powell in his famous presentation to the UN, where he modeled a vial of anthrax while giving a presentation in 2003, which is now reviled as a complete failed and empty narrative that was pushed in order to get us into war. And as I discussed previously in the article, in order to military leaders have admitted that the Iraq war was entered to a large extent in order to protect oil interests. And so it was surprising to me that the NSA had this degree of involvement in the narrative that led to the war in Iraq, because I was more under the impression that the CIA had led to that type of groupthink, which then influenced legacy press outlets. So this was new to me. The file emphasizes the point when it states, SIGINT also contributed to the composition of the US President's speech at the UN General Assembly 2002 and to Secretary Powell's presentation to the Security Council on the case against Iraq dictator, among other events. And I repeated that quote again because I felt that these passages were absolutely mind-blowing in their blatant portrayal of the NSA as responsible for these events. The passage indicates that the NSA's signals intelligence contributed to the now infamous presentation to the UN given by former Secretary of State Colin Powell, who called that speech, in retrospect, a great intelligence failure, according to PBS. Crucially, the document also states that the NSA's signals intelligence, quote, helped the US, UN, state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan, countless peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, Sudan, and so many other situations. And again, I repeated that for a reason, and that is that these statements are insane. They are amazing. This critical statement indicates that the NSA was not only responsible for providing faulty intelligence that led to the Iraq war, but that it has also contributed directly to foreign policy decisions made by both the United Nations and the United States. And I say that because in the passage it states that that US, UN, and state officials were influenced. So this is the United States and the UN being influenced by the NSA. The statement amounts to an admission that the NSA has been a driving force in the American foreign policy and the United Nations decision-making process for years, if not decades. And Suzie had mentioned this and spoken about this in the sense that this is not just an admission in regards to Iraq. It is a statement of responsibility for policy decisions going back years and decades. And so that is of huge concern. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to finish on this point in the article, because it is, I think, one of the, Suzie has stated this as well, it's one of the most significant things that we've seen coming out of the Snowden files that was not intensely reported on by legacy media outlets. And then I just concluded with a brief statement saying that this is an important story and Disobedient Media will continue to provide coverage regarding the results of Decipher U collaborative analysis as it unfolds. I had almost hit 4,000 words and I didn't want to drag it on too far with an entire sum up concluding paragraph. So I see a few things that I need to fix in the next few hours in this article, some repetitions and some sentences that need to be reworded, but that's my sum up of the first half-ish of batch 4 of the Snowden files from The Intercept. I really didn't even get that far into the streams that we've done just on this batch. It was just so much information that I had to cut it off relatively early. And I'm hoping to get the next article out on this batch in the next week or so. I hope maybe by next Friday I'll have something else written. But I'm really grateful for collaborating with Suzie in this process because I'm learning so much that I had no clue about. As an independent journalist, you feel like maybe you know a little bit about a topic, but it's just opened my eyes to how much I don't know. And I think that that's a good thing because it makes me want to go research these primary documents more. And I hope that that's the same experience that viewers are having, is that they're encouraged to go read primary documents for themselves. I've heard from a few people that they have been inspired to do that. So that's wonderful. And I hope that that continues. And Suzie, I don't know what your status is or if you're around in the background, but if you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. But your audio is a bit in and out.
Okay, if you want to just give me 3 minutes,
I can't really make out what you're saying.
Is that any better?
Try again.
Okay, give me 3 minutes. I'm gonna okay, and then I'll jump on cam and I'll give you all my feedback.
Okay, great. Thank you. That would be wonderful. I'm gonna stop share real quick and just check chat. And I haven't actually opened the YouTube stream, so give me 1 minute while I do that. Okay. So yeah, if any of you have compliments, or I'm not compliments, God, I just saw the chat. But if you have any questions or comments on the article and anything that I missed, anything that you thought should be added or anything like that, I'd love to hear it. So thank you. I really appreciate all your comments so far that I'm reading through. And I'm not sure why somebody brought up the executive order from Trump. But thank you so much, everyone. You're wonderful. And thank you for tuning in and listening to that long description of that file. But I think it, as Suzie said, it's really good to have a sum up of what we've done in the last few weeks, because there's so much that, and I know that when we're doing a live stream, there are gaps, and we have to go grab something, or we just have a monologue or a bit of a rant on various topics at times. So when the information and the discussion of the information is broken up like that, it can seem like maybe not as much is being discussed and found as there actually is. And what's amazing, like absolutely amazing to me, is to read back and to re-listen to our streams, and then to look up what are the various articles that we're looking at, the individuals like Cusick who are in these documents, and to see that these individuals have zero news reports written about them. They have zero coverage, or the documents like the handsets and the geographical targeting and spying, that document had zero coverage. So I think what we're doing is really worthwhile. I think it's really important information that we're finding. And I think, as I said before, learning from Suzie has been an amazing, enlightening process. And I think that is at least personally helpful. And I hope that it's also beneficial to viewers. So I'm going to take a break 1 second and just tweet out that we're live and whatnot. Yeah, and in the process of writing that article, a lot of it was simply looking at the document we had looked at, and then listening to what Suzie had to say to explain it, and then also researching if there was any news coverage of it. And much of the time, what Suzie had to say absolutely opened my eyes to the context and to the background of these issues. For example, network security, which I had no idea. I have no concept of that until Suzie explained it. I'm just taking a second to tweet out that we're live. Oh, Suzie, are you there? I can see you.
It looked like death warmed up, seriously.
No, you look fine.
Hold on.
You've got a lot going on. And I'm just going to wait a moment for Suzie to come back. And like I said, I'm just trying to tweet out the link and that we're here. 1 second. I always feel so awkward tweeting while I know I'm being filmed. And I think it's really great that Suzie asked me to read my article because, the article, the finished product that you come out with, whether it's Suzie's article, my article, or whether it's the clips that Fly makes where they go through the findings and they highlight the important elements of what we've spoken about, those are the finished products that are as much a part of collaborative, as much a part of the journalism process as any other, obviously. And they're the product that people interface with usually. But I think it's really helpful to have that as an element of what we look at here, as well as the research process. I think it would be pretty boring to have the drafting process also be shown, but I think to have that beginning, middle, and end sort of present on this stream is really great. And it's something that, I think it was Esoteric Ed put it really, really well when he said it was, journalism live, and that, you're really seeing the process that we go through as independent journalists when we write and when we research. So. Always takes longer to tweet than I realize it does. And so I believe, if I remember correctly, we were on about 139, I believe was the document that we were at with the Snowden files. So if Suzie's going to be away from the computer for a few minutes, I will just dive right into those files and begin analyzing them. And whenever Suzie's ready to come back, then we'll just hear what she has to say. So I'm going to share screen again in one moment, unless Suzie's here.
Sorry, my timing's bad because I'm back.
No, you're right.
Okay, first of all, my apologies for not appearing to be here tonight. I actually was here, but I've just spent the last 3 or 4 hours helping a little person to puke over and over again. So
no, I totally understand.
Okay, Elizabeth, your article is incredible. Your article is amazing. It's amazing for a number of reasons to me. First of all, it's really well written.
Thank you.
I love your writing. Your writing is really, really top notch. And I read a lot. I read pretty much all day, every day. So I truly mean it when I say that. Second of all,
that's a huge compliment. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Second of all, it's really classy writing. Second of all, it has shown me that like what I'd done previously with my Decipher You reporting, my written reporting, was basically like just picking out these little interesting morsels. And it was almost like 10 things you didn't know about the NSA, like kind of style writing, right? Like it didn't actually number them, but I don't think there's more than probably about 100 words, max about each point. And also, so you've fleshed it out, you've made it a proper article rather than just a list of like findings, which is basically what I've been doing with Decipher You to date. So I think your contribution is evolving the reporting and raising the standard, raising the bar on the standard of reporting of these findings. But also you're going and getting all of the public references and the public sources. And so you're taking the finding that we've made and explaining it. Then you're adding in my deciphering of the technical information into regular speak. But then you're going and cross-referencing that information against what's in the public domain. And then that's just giving it a total another layer of credibility because you're evidencing the points. So you're evidencing them with the documents, you're evidencing them with whatever level of expertise I could be ascribed with, but then you are backing them up with additional public sources. And that is completely next level. That is really, really next level. So
I think it's
really well done. I think it's really well done. I think probably my only criticism would be that, and this is the same thing with me when I read through my own work, because you know your own work, because you wrote it yourself, you tend to move through it quite quickly. But I think people who are seeing the article for the first time, including me actually, I tend to read through a lot more slowly because I need to let each point really sink in.
Yeah, that makes
sense. So at times then I was actually tempted to come in after you and read through the article again. But to read through it at my pace as someone who hasn't read it before, who doesn't know what's coming in the next sentence.
Absolutely.
But then also as authors and as journalists, we're not used to having to read our work on live stream. So it's not.
Well, the other part of that is that I was literally trying to get this published before our stream. So I'm rereading the information that I had just written. And so that adds to that sense of familiarity. If I had given it a day between, then it probably wouldn't have been so, kind of fast paced in the way that I read it. But, life is as life is sometimes. You can't really help it. So
I think you've done an amazing job.
Thank you so much.
Amazing job. And then my thoughts about Decipher as a whole. I've been getting a lot of feedback from people about it, a lot of feedback. And people are just like, this is another world first. This is something that's never been done before. I say another because pretty much like Internet Party has just been hammering out these we're like first to hold our meetings online and first to release our strategy documents in the middle of a political campaign and first to have like a leader live streaming in from the other side of the planet during an election and so on and so forth. It's been like a year of firsts, right? But Decipher You is first serious analytical journalism of source documents live online. And like I explained in a previous week, that was almost accidental.
It was amazing the way that fell together.
But it is definitely significant. Definitely. So, I can't make some of the grand statements that I've heard yet from others who very enthusiastically tell me this changes everything. I'm not sure this changes everything, but I am sure that it's changing the way that some people are looking at the Snowden disclosures and the Snowden documents. Because people had assumed that the big shebang stuff had already come.
Exactly. Yes.
The big stories were in the past rather than in the future, in the present. I would sum this up by saying that these documents have changed the way that I see the entire world.
Yeah.
That's not an understatement. They have changed the way that I see the entire world, the way that the world functions, the way that the intelligence agencies interface with everything, commerce, industry, society. I felt last week like it sounded like, no one said this to me, but this is my personal feelings. I felt last week I was accidentally diminishing the privacy aspect. And, there are I've said pretty consistently throughout the last few years that there are some things about my situation and what I did that are not in the public arena and that go a ways to explaining how voraciously I was targeted. But I've chosen to, for my own reasons, keep that out of the public arena. The day may come where that is not the case and where that it becomes very well known. And then people will understand to what degree I mean the words that I'm about to say. I really care about privacy. Privacy meant the world to me. Privacy was something that needed to be saved. And privacy was what they were doing was eradicating privacy. And that was apparent to me many years ago. But I feel like the things that we have learned in these sessions about the UN, about war, and the process by which wars are given the stamp, the seal of approval, the process by which they are given that. I feel like these things are like even a bigger deal, because this isn't just the violation of the privacy of people in the West. This is the cost of the lives of people who aren't in the West and some of whom are. And that has completely in some ways spun the entire way that I see the last 6 years of my life, because I feel like the things we're now discussing and studying are even more important than what was at stake previously.
And they at least give context to those things, you know, like, and for this to be that revolutionary for you, when you've already, you were previously aware of a lot of these issues and you've been studying in this area for a long time, I think speaks to how important these findings are as well.
I've been studying the way that Western targets have been targeted by the intelligence agencies. Yeah. I didn't understand the full extent of the activities, the other activities of the intelligence agencies. So I'd been studying the persecution of Kim.com. I'd been studying the persecution of Occupy activists, of WikiLeaks activists. I'd been studying the methods of oppression meted out to us. I had begun to study the interrelationships between the members of the Five Eyes. Like I said last week, I was talking about how the sphere widens. It's gotten wider and wider and wider, to we're at the point now where I'm understanding that these agencies have influence. In their own documents, they use the word influence.
Yeah,
they have influence over every facet of human existence, from finance and banking to international affairs, diplomacy and relations, to the war and the military, and to literally people living or dying, to education, like we see now in the pervasive surveillance of even children through Google Classroom and things like this, to the future of technology itself, the development, the architecture, to the strategic, this stuff about the essay competition and the strategic planning for 2020 back in 2004, they are literally shaping the future of human existence for every person on this planet. This is what I mean when I say now I'm seeing this as more than privacy. When it was just being targeted, privacy was a really big deal. But when I understand now that these agencies are meddling in the entire future of the planet 20 years ahead of time, that's where I have begun to understand it's about more than just privacy. So yes, the privacy violations are egregious. They had no right to ever be doing that to us. They have no right to be targeting civilians, as I discussed last week. They have no right to be using military infrastructure, military facilities, capabilities, technologies, resources against civilians. That is egregious. But the fact that they've subverted the UN, that they've subverted nearly the entire international community, that they are essentially blackmailing, or what's a better word, like where we discussed how they entice countries to give their own citizens data in exchange for the data of the other countries, etc. It's like not blackmail. I need a different word than blackmail.
Quid pro quo, or
no, it's like enticing, but it's more than enticing. I don't know, the word is escaping me at the moment, but this basically it just comes down to the fact that where before I considered myself a privacy activist or a transparency activist, now I'm starting to think like I'm not even sure there's a term for it. Like I want to emancipate the entire human race from the meddling of these agencies who think that they have the right to human evolution, to human society decades in advance. They don't have that right. Absolutely. We talk about self-determination of peoples. We need self-determination of the human race, because we don't have it so long as those agencies are pulling the strings, so long as they're designing our future, a generation ahead. then we completely lack self-determination.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that is the fight, whether you're Lee Camp, Caitlin Johnstone, you, me, or, you know, for all these independent journalists, I think that's the point, the ultimate point that it comes down to, is that this is a fight for the whole of humanity. And Caitlin writes about that a lot. But I think that it's both. So there's the role of the independent media, the independent anti-establishment journalism across the board to fight that fight. And then there's also the revelation for individual people that realize, I have to do this myself. You know, I can't rely on CNN to tell me what's going on. I have to look at these documents myself. And so individually, person by person, that's the fight that has to happen. But
I agree. Everyone has to contribute in the best way that they can. And, you know, for some people, that's not studying documents or creating media. For some people, that's leaving a coat at that Dallas, Texas clothing store that just is letting homeless people take coats off the sidewalk if they need them to keep warm. You know, everybody gives in their own way. But I agree that we need to, it's not just that we need to teach people not to Google search. We need to teach them that there is education available outside of the bought and paid for corporate universities and charter high schools, that there is media and information available outside of CNN and BBC, that there is science and technology that is available outside of the major industrial R&D departments. There are people like Haven is like a classic example, like Snowden's app, you know, the Guardian project.
Exactly. Yeah, I was reading about that a little bit.
Have technologists, you know, that apps like that, it wasn't so long ago, you know, would have had to come out of Apple, would have had to come out of some other complicit corporation. And it would have been marketed as a surveillance tool, not as a surveillance self-defense tool, which is what Haven is. It's a surveillance self-defense tool. So we are slowly building the new world, the replacement. We're slowly building the replacement media. Now we're even building replacement applications. We have like some hope for the future in technology, some hope for the future in media. But this has changed. This series has absolutely changed the way that I view what the intelligence agencies do and the scale that they do it on.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And to that end, I think it's probably arguably been my most important work, though I think everything I did prior probably led to this point.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think anything in terms of the whole, I don't think anything is more important than the other overall. And I think that is a great note to dive into some more documents on. So I'm going to go get started on document 139. And we will see where it leads us. Maybe it'll be nothing. Maybe it'll be something interesting. I'll start sharing screen in a moment. I'm going to open up a few files first. So we're on 139. And usually I handwrite notes as I'm reading, but since I'll be glancing through these, I will just re-listen to this later when I take my own notes for articles. Okay. So here we have, 1 second. Zoom is just messing with the YouTube live stream. All right. Hey, Suzie.
Sorry to interrupt, Elizabeth. Can you take it off screen share just for 1 second?
Okay, no, not a problem.
Cockatoo just said that coercing is my word. Coercing is exactly the word that I was looking for. It's the type of coercion that's detailed in Diary of an Economic Hitman.
Yeah, exactly.
It's where they say, here is a carrot, but if you don't take this yummy, juicy carrot that everybody else is taking, then we're going to cut your head off with the Saudi Arabian sword. Like,
perfect.
this is
Perfect sum up. No, yeah, no, that really is the word, and that's the analogy.
It is coercion.
Yeah.
So thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to tie up that little loose.
No, not a problem. Well, if you're ready to read through, I am. So
go for it. I can't promise that I won't have to like run off and disappear. I just have to like keep an ear out. But I am here, and I'll just pipe up with my 2 cents, or feel free to ask questions.
Yeah, no, jump in whenever. Interrupt happily. I don't mind. Let's see. Zoom's messing up for me again. All right, here we are. So 139 is interview with Charlie Meals, Signals Intelligence Deputy Director. It looks like it's unclassified for the first couple of paragraphs, and it talks about, it says, there have been many memorable events. For example, I remember being on duty. I forget that I don't actually have to read through all of this. I'll try and find anything interesting. So he's saying that his first field tour at GCHQ in Cheltenham, England, really stands out in his mind. The field tour in Hawaii was also memorable. And his first job was with the Air Force. After that, he went to the NSA permanently in the 60s. Worked in the Soviet, quote, weather shop. And I have no idea what that means. So if anybody in chat knows what the Soviet weather shop means, or if Suzie knows, just interrupt me and let me know. Okay, and then he goes on to explain it. The only effective way the US had of determining the weather in various parts of the Soviet Union was to listen to their communications. That's what that's referring to. The Soviets knew this and actually encrypted the locations of their weather reports. You may ask why we needed the information. The primary customer was the Strategic Air Command, which needed to have current weather reports in case US bombers ever had to fly into airspace. We knew that the Soviets were serious about invading Czechoslovakia in 1968 when they began to include Czech weather data on their military weather broadcasts. This weather effort was actually quite big. So his sum up is to be open to opportunities. I think it's interesting that they analyzed weather reports in this way. I don't think it's particularly mind-blowingly interesting. I don't see anything that's significant in terms of our analysis other than just kind of contextual learning. So moving on to 140, brown bag presentation, exploiting converging networks. To register for this event, we're limited to 50 participants, but it's a secret session. Well, unfortunately, that's not too much information for us to look at. But I think that the title, SIGINT development strategy and governance, it would have been, I'm sure, an interesting talk. Moving on to 141, it's titled Cover/Anonymity, when mission requires NSA association to be hidden. And it's from Redacted, Data Acquisition, Special Operational Support. And this is in late 2004. Says, imagine a couple of scenarios. First, a target of interest communication network is in the process of being upgraded and an opportunity to gain access is discovered. To do so requires NSA personnel to operate under non-official cover. Second, the Foreign Affairs Directorate has established a SIGINT relationship with a new partner. The new partner will allow an in-country technical support facility if the relationship and fact that NSA personnel are operating in a country are concealed.
Okay, the first thing I would say here is that target of interest communication network.
Yeah.
That could be a person, or it could be a company, or it could be a department, or it could be any type of group. In the legislation in New Zealand, they call it a class of target.
Okay, that's interesting. That makes
So
sense.
that could be a university network. It could be a corporate media group network. It could be in almost anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be a target of interest as in a person. It could be a target of interest as in a location or as in a class of target, meaning some kind of grouping around some common thread. The second thing is that partner. That partner could be a corporate partner, or it could be an agency partner. It could be, well, I guess it wouldn't be State Department because that would be official cover, not non-official cover. But it's really dodgy. It almost sounds like some of these corporations are willing to compromise themselves. Indeed. In the sense of them saying the partner will allow
technical support facility.
They will allow and say personnel.
If it's secret and concealed.
Yeah. If it's concealed, sounds like the partner doesn't want to be caught doing it. And if they don't want to be caught doing it, why wouldn't they want to be caught doing it? It means that either their relationship with the NSA is not known or the activity violates its own charter.
Exactly.
The own constitutional charter of a company. For example, there is legal ramifications for companies exposing themselves to risk.
That makes sense. So their shareholders would be angry. Their stock
could be a shareholder issue, could be a constitutional issue for the company, for the company's constitution. It could be a legal issue in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what the company is, there could be a potential for some sort of law to be violated that they would want.
If they're participating with what's essentially a law enforcement agency, because there's a huge difference between a law enforcement agency coming to a company and saying, we are running an investigation, here is the warrant, we want this information. That's one situation. But if they're just saying, hey, we're not, we don't have a warrant, this is non-official, this is actually a massive fishing expedition because we just want to have a backdoor in this product in case we want to use it in the future. That's a completely different case. And so any company who is found to be participating in the second case rather than the first case could open themselves up to massive liability, either with their clients or their customers, in terms of the public, consumer, customers, or potentially illegal.
Absolutely. Well,
it's just my take on the first paragraph.
It looks like we're going to find some interesting things this evening, just right off the bat. So this is great. And then I'm just going to keep reading. And if you have any thoughts, please jump in. I'm totally happy to listen and learn. So the next paragraph, which is classified, states, so how does one go about making NSA personnel look like they actually work for an entity other than the NSA? So this is, goes along with what we were saying before. What regulations and policies must be followed? How does one ensure cover and anonymity mechanisms don't conflict and expose other sensitive activities? What training should be provided to effectively use and maintain a cover? And the simple answer to all of these questions is to contact the Special Operational Support SOS Office S3092. SOS is the NSA's designated cover support office, DCSO. As such, it provides administration of all NSA CSS cover and sensitive personnel support programs, which include maintaining compliance with DoD regulations and policy, coordinating cover plans and operations with the Defense Central Cover Staff and Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. There is so much here that I have never heard of before in my life, so this is teaching me a lot. Coordinating as required for the provision of cover and anonymity with logistics, transportation, personnel, and medical support. providing cover and anonymity guidance to mission elements that are coordinating sensitive activities, working with DoD activities, federal state governments, non-governmental organizations. That's interesting, I think, to establish and maintain cover support mechanisms. For example, DoD common access cards, travel documents, state driver's licenses, credit cards, post office boxes, social security cards, pocket litter, and telecommunications. And that's the second time we've looked at pocket litter. But you know, it's interesting to me to hear about not just governmental entities like the post office providing cover for spies or for NSA employees, but also NGOs doing the same thing. So I'm wondering if this means that NGOs are being asked by the NSA, hey, can you provide us cover? Or what level of control the NSA might have on NGOs, and in what way? In what way is that control manifested? Because I think that opens a whole can of worms of some interesting questions. And I think, you know, in the beginning, I think it was in batch 3 that we looked at, obviously, NGO collaboration with the NSA as well as corporate collaboration.
Are you able to scroll up a little bit, Elizabeth?
Yeah, right here, sure. At the bottom in the second last paragraph on screen right now, it says a black contract will be arranged and effective cover mechanisms put in place. The second scenario is dependent on the sensitivity of the relationship with SIGINT. That just sounded interesting. For more sensitive third-party relationships, the cover mechanisms will be more complex. Interesting. I'm going to scroll down a tad just to see if there's anything else in this document or if that pretty much ends it. Okay, looks like that's the end.
Sorry, what was the last line? Ensuring personnel are provided at, all right, okay.
Yeah, well, I was just checking if there was more on the next page. There's no more information. This is the whole document.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the classifications.
Yeah.
So interesting that there's a classified paragraph that mentions the Special Operational Support Office, and then it goes up to a secret classification when they say, in short, SOS's role is to develop and maintain the cover support program. And they basically said that already.
Interesting. Yeah, some of the classifications that they have in various documents are either confusing or don't seem quite right, in my humble opinion. But I think in and of itself, this raises more questions than it answers. And I think that reading between the lines here, it will be pretty clear that there could be some questionable activities happening, especially with NGOs or businesses and that type of thing. Like we can speculate about some very, very questionable activities that could be going on as a result of this type of setup. But in itself, it just says sensitive. It doesn't really detail the type of stuff that we could analyze as shady or not.
I don't think the fact that NSA, can you take a screenshot for a minute, please?
Yeah, sure. Not a problem. Yeah.
I don't think that the fact that NSA like places deep cover agents in itself is really that surprising, or something that we didn't know. I'm very interested in the roles of the partners. Like, who are
Exactly. It raises a lot of
they?
questions. Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
exactly are they allowing to happen?
Definitely.
We have thought about the big tech corporate partnerships with NSA being like where they sign up, like Microsoft entering the prism program. Where they sign up to a specific program and they agree to voluntarily provide access. But what this document is making me wonder is, are there things that they provide that are outside of a formal agreement, or that rather than them voluntarily opting into giving NSA something, do they simply allow NSA to come and take it?
Yeah, for sure.
Are there companies who allow their own technologies to be subverted or penetrated?
Yeah, I think that
are they complicit in the weakening of their own technologies?
Exactly. I think this raises a lot of questions on that subject. Like I said, I don't think it answers anything. Like, we can speculate that potentially something with the tech companies or whichever companies. Unfortunately, we just don't have the information to answer that, at least in this file. But it definitely raises some questions about their operation with corporations and with NGOs as well, for sure.
I'm wondering too how it ties back into the information needs requests.
Yeah, good point.
I'm wondering if there are information needs requests that are something along the lines of X company has developed Y new technology and we want to penetrate it for Z reason, and where NSA can't in and of itself come up with the way to do so, whether that is then when they go and plant an agent into, it's essentially the sabotaging from the inside. That's my take on this.
Definitely, that's what it sounds like.
They talk about accesses, providing accesses, but how they get those accesses, how they establish those, it's like I guess backdoor is the best way to describe it. They're leaving it open for the future. Like, it's not just getting an access once, it's having a ongoing access perennially after that point of compromise. So they're exploiting it. They're creating an exploit that can be exploited going forward by other NSA employees. It's highly unlikely to be a one-off.
Absolutely.
Unless it's a data set. So if it's a static data set that's not going to change or evolve over time and they're just exfiltrating data, then perhaps it's a one-off. But I very much, the involvement of the partners makes it seem like they're looking to subvert technologies.
Definitely.
And my question is, are they doing that with the companies that own those technologies being fully aware that is what is being done and participating in it, and needing it to be covert to cover themselves from a liability perspective?
Definitely. Yeah, if I was writing about this, I would personally put it under the category of, again, the intermingling of the NSA and the corporate sphere, and like a really good, perfect, it's a really great document for making that point. And so, I mean, we've talked about that before, but I think it's noteworthy for that type of point. So
we definitely need more information. I'd like to know who those partners are, because I don't believe that those partners are just Five Eyes partners.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear that the partners are corporate or can be corporate.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, and I'm hoping, as we've said before a few times, I'm hoping that maybe some further documents down the line might add to this, hopefully.
And they usually do. We usually find something which gives us more information.
Yeah. So I'm going to breeze on to 142 in a second here, if I can share screen. We've got about 30 minutes left, and I'd like to get through as many as we possibly can before.
Go for it.
Before time is up. So 142 is titled New Commander at NASIC. and it's from redacted at NASIC account manager. And in the second paragraph, it says the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, NASIC, is a subordinate command of the Air Intelligence Agency, AIA, and a principal subordinate unit of the Air Combat Command, ACC. Is the Air Force's single intelligence production center and the primary Department of Defense producer of foreign air and space intelligence. So that is a topic of interest, I think, just right off the bat. Because I don't remember, at least in the documents I've looked at with Suzie so far, I don't remember this being discussed too much. The NASIC team exploits all source intelligence to assess current and projected foreign forces, weapon system capabilities, and employment techniques. NASIC products and services play a key role in ensuring that American forces are fully informed of the capabilities, blah, blah. I mean, this type of this type of activity, like as in the other document, it's not surprising that NSA's employees would sometimes be undercover. It's not surprising that the Air Force would want to know about the weapons capabilities of enemies. So,
the Air Intelligence Agency.
Yeah.
So we've got the Naval Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Army Intelligence. So this is the Air Intelligence. So they actually have literally an intelligence agency for the Air Force, you know, the skies and outer space.
Yeah, the name of the agency. The name of the agency was new to me, and that was more interesting than the next paragraph where it described what it did.
The Air Intel, that's the first time I've ever heard the terminology Air Intelligence Agency, and the implications are massive.
Exactly, yeah, and the fact that it's in space too. Yeah. I've seen a couple of references to that type of thing in WikiLeaks where it talks about space weapons, but yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I would note this document simply for the mention of that agency, more than the fact that the agency tries to get intelligence on weapon systems and that type of thing. That's just a standard.
Do we still have our pirate pad up?
I don't know. I have not asked.
If so, I would love for a note to be made on the last document, just with the question: who are the partners?
Definitely.
Who are the partners? And then with this document, just a note on Air Intelligence Agency so that we can look at and find out what else there is around about them.
Yeah, that makes sense. If somebody in chat can do that while I am screen sharing, I don't want to switch between too much and lose momentum reading through this. So if someone in chat can bring up the pirate pad and throw it into the link and add those documents that Suzie just mentioned, that would be fantastic. I'm going to keep reading as somebody does that. So it says that other than being fully informing American forces, it says NASIC is interested in any significant foreign political or economic developments because of their technological ramifications and their importance for NASIC's predictive studies. So I think that's interesting. It's not just keeping a sort of a log going of all of the defensive, like enemy weapons capabilities. They're very much, this agency is very much focused on predictive studies, and I think that's interesting. In addition, NASIC develops targeting and mission planning intelligence materials. In recent years, the mission of NASIC has expanded to accommodate new global realities and to better position that organization to serve the needs of a broader and more diverse customer set. I think that's interesting. NASIC is organized into 8 directorates. 5 of the directorates have daily contact with the NSA. I think that's interesting as well. The Air and Electronic Systems Directorate, AE, responsible for performing aerodynamic weapon systems analysis. The Battle Space Production Directorate, BP, which includes behavioral influences analysis. I'm going to say that again, which includes behavioral influences analysis. in addition to air capabilities evaluation, integration applications, and denial and deception, which we've heard about a lot. And then the Data Exploitation Directorate, DE, is responsible for a significant role in technical SIGINT weapons exploitation, as well as IMINT, MASINT, and foreign material exploitation information needs, management, and a significant community weapons processing center. The Global Threat Directorate, GT, includes C4IO, I have no idea what that means, Suzie might, futures, integrated air defense systems, and strategic technologies and warning. Okay, so the Space and Missiles SM Directorate, responsible for broad aspects of space and ballistic missile technology. I think all of these are interesting just in the sense of having, and I'm not sure that I'd write about them in an article, like list them all, but just for my own knowledge, I would definitely, and if somebody wants to do this in the Pirate Pad after they're done with what Suzie asked for, it would be really great to have this, just note this document and that it lists a lot of definitions. And in you know, I don't know about viewers, but for my learning process, it's really great to just have an expanded awareness of all these agencies and the alphabet soup and these different directorates under the agencies. And as far as the list of what these different directorates are doing, I thought that the Battlespace Production Directorate, BP, and the fact that it includes behavioral influences analysis was extremely interesting, because I would not think that battlespace production would have anything to do with behavioral influences. And a number of, and the other directorates that mention the globalization, so like global threat, and also the next one down, which is space and missiles, and it talks about space ballistic technology. That's pretty groundbreaking, and I think that's noteworthy. Then it goes, the last paragraph or so of the document talks about the fact that NASIC was known previously as the National Air Intelligence Center, NAIC, and the Foreign Technology Division has served almost continuously, has been served almost continuously by an NSA CSS representative since 1985. And just talks about a customer relations team positioned to help other members of the team. Yeah, no, it's not talking about anything particularly interesting in that last paragraph, I don't think. These three represent the point of the spear in the mission to make the relationship between NSA and National Air and Space Intelligence Center a healthy and productive one. Okay, so I hope somebody has this in Pirate Pad. I think it's really interesting, more in the sense of definitions than anything else. And just bringing up the fact that we're talking about space as well as behavioral and predictive studies. So those are all interesting, and we've talked about some of those before. The next file, which I believe, if I go back, this is Fosway. This is 143. It is titled Fosway, Massive Analysis Attacks. And it's all labeled top secrets. This, I hope, is interesting. It says, pardon me, members from the Five Eyes community met in a very successful working party led by the Advanced Analysis Laboratory from 14 to 16 September 2004 to determine next steps in their collaboration on the Fosway project. Fosway is dedicated to the development of massive analytic attacks against global metadata supported by extensive automation. Wow, that is all new to me. Massive analytic attacks against global metadata supported by extensive automation. This is in 2004, they're talking about this. And I don't know, maybe I'm behind the times. I've never heard of the Fosway project. So it will be a catalyst for developing analytic concepts of the future and proving the practicality and benefits of these new concepts through real world implementations. These analytic attacks will be designed to extract communities of interest from global networks and identify them and the process in which they are engaged. Successful analytic attacks will identify new targets as well as maintain continuity on existing targets. Fosway will help focus analysis on higher level tasks like hypothesis generation and assessment, and will seek to automate low level functions like data manipulation. Fosway prototypes will be fully functional and demonstrate that the concepts are achievable. This is insane.
That is the data manipulation stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, have you ever heard of Fosway? Is that new to you, or is?
I've not heard of Fosway. I'm just like trying to absorb this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the last document we need to study again.
Yeah.
Because I am unfamiliar with the agency. I would like to find out a lot more about it, and then I'd like to go back and have another look at the document to understand the full scope of what's actually going on there.
Yeah, I really like to hear your thoughts on that.
Stuff about, I understand that analysis attacks in the sense of harvesting new targets, as they just said, but this wanting to automate the data manipulation is significant.
Yeah.
We'll seek to automate low-level functions like data manipulation. I think again we need to look into Fosway and see what else is out there. Certainly, the only time I've ever come across data manipulation in terms of like official documentation is in Australia's data retention bill. There was a specific line that said that covered them not just for the intercepting or the retention of data, but for the manipulation of it. And at the time, that was a really big deal to me because that was not included in the GCSB bill.
Yeah.
So at the time, it seemed that the Australians wanted to not just intercept or retain the information of their targets, but to have the ability to manipulate the data that's coming between the targets. Definitely. It's essentially making the state a middleman, a man in the middle.
Yeah.
To all data transfers. The potential for nefarious activity, if you can manipulate data, is way beyond the potential just from intercepting or retaining it. Now, I'm not sure at all that that's the sense that they mean when they talk about data manipulation here and automation of data manipulation. But it has like really scary like AI implications.
Definitely. That's what I thought of when I was reading.
Automating any manipulation of data.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of as I was reading, was the fact that this sounded a lot like AI, and this is only in 2004. I mean, it's late 2004, but that still seems very, very early for this type of thing. So I was surprised to see that.
I think the big universities who've had AI labs for decades, I think in the commercial sphere, in the consumer sphere, it is very, very, very early. I think in the military and the tertiary sphere, it is a well-established discipline by 2004, even though it was rudimentary by today's standards.
That makes sense.
But that data manipulation, I mean, if I had a highlighter pen, I would be highlighting those words right now.
Yeah, I wish that I'll start screen share again so I can kind of highlight just the way you do with the blue. So yeah, data manipulation. I wish it was it's really great in WikiLeaks how you can actually, you know, highlight yeah, if somebody, I don't know if anybody's got the pirate pad open or using it. I'm going to even though I'm screen sharing, I'm going to check over chat and see if anybody's got that working. And yeah, I can't see that anybody's got the pirate pad up at the moment. Well, in that case, we'll just have to come back. I mean, I'm going to re-listen to this stream, so I'll have to take note of what we've discussed already and look into this a bit more in depth. But is there any, do we need to read through this again or go back to the other document, or do you want to keep going? Or
we need to wrap up in about 12 minutes, and I feel a bit like I'm way behind on the chat at the moment.
Yeah, no, me too.
Those last two documents, anything that we're not confident about, I really want to set aside and come back to.
Definitely, both of those were really
interesting. It's really important to me to do so, because I don't want to put anything in the too hard basket. I would rather
definitely not.
Rather actually do the work and find the missing pieces.
Yeah, no.
Air Intelligence Agency is very, very interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, and the fact that they had ballistic directorates responsible for predictive analysis as far as behavior. If I'm reading that correctly, that's ridiculous. Or at least
maybe that ties into all of the automated air defense.
Okay, that makes
missile
sense.
shields and the blah blah blah, that kind of thing.
That makes much more sense than sort of the social
space aspect. The space aspect of the Air Intelligence Agency was interesting. But the fact that the intelligence agencies are actually separated by, like, we'd heard, how many times about these 19 intelligence agencies, but I had never clicked that there is actually a separate intelligence agency for each of the branches of the military. They have their own jurisdiction. And what it seems to be is that those 19 intelligence agencies, 18 of them are customers of the NSA.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
We've been talking about the White House and the US UN mission and the CIA being customers of the NSA. But what it appears to be to me is that all of those other intelligence agencies are customers of NSA. So NSA is actually doing the collections, passing it to them, and then those intelligence agencies are filtering it.
That sounds right.
And applying it to their own uses. So I think you find that this information needs portal, where the customers are logging in their information needs requests, that there would be information needs requests coming in from Army intelligence, from air intelligence, from naval intelligence, from blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I would like to come back to both of those documents because I think there's a lot more in both of them than what I'm just touching on there.
I agree. I definitely.
The automation of data manipulation is definitely something that I would really like to get to the bottom of. So I'd like to know what data is being manipulated, in what context, and what aspect they're automating it.
Definitely, I agree.
Thank you, Fly, for saying so many lovely things.
Yeah, everyone in chat has been absolutely amazing this evening, and thank you so much. And I think it's wonderful that everyone's had a conversation. Oh, and I see Crockatoo did get up the pirate pad. Thank you so much, Crockatoo.
Oh, cool.
Appreciate that. And I was going to say, I'm really glad to see that everyone is having a great time talking to each other during these streams. That's always wonderful. What? What's that?
Oh my God. Matt, Suzie may not save the world, but I know and trust you will at least tell us the truth about how the world is ending. Classic.
Oh yeah, and I just want to add, Kathy B and Fly also posted the pirate pad. Thank you so much. You guys are having a wonderful conversation. I totally missed it. Apologies.
Look, I think the only thing that can save the world is people, is love, is people putting their hands out across divides, is people actively overcoming the divide and conquer.
I agree. That's extremely on point and true.
Yeah, so like when we can see people who completely disagree with each other getting along with each other, and valuing each other's right to an opinion, and being proud to support each other's right to that opinion, even if they're bipolar opposite, diametrically opposed positions. I think that's when we'll see some hope.
I agree. And when people realize, that they even though they may approach the solution to a problem differently, they have a lot in common in seeing a similar problem.
Yeah, the homogenization is really destructive. So when you see social groups becoming self-segregated to only people who think the same things, only people who consume the same information, this is where you really lose out. You lose out big time. We're supposed to be a melting pot, the human race. Like, we're supposed to be a little bit of everything. We're supposed to be a spectrum. And if you only embrace this much of that spectrum, it's a really dangerous slippery slope.
Yeah, and across the board, whether in any aspect of life, I think that's true. And I think especially when it comes, we could go off on a rant, but I think especially when it comes to free speech, that works as well.
We've only got 6 minutes left.
Well, just I think WikiLeaks has put out a few tweets on this just recently, just in the sense that you want to advocate for free speech. That does not mean you have to advocate for everyone agreeing with the speech that happens.
Yeah, but WikiLeaks, and I've actually further progressed my article about Julian. I'm still working on it, but it's going to be freaking monolithic, like 8,000 monolithic.
I'm really looking forward to reading that. So,
and it's covering every single strand and aspect of the WikiLeaks debate in every context. But something you've got to look at is, if you have a sector of the activism or of society hating on WikiLeaks 24/7, how attractive does that make their position to WikiLeaks? Is WikiLeaks going to be like, I really want to get closer to you guys who are just ridiculing the hell out of us and undermining our every activity all day, every day? No, of course they're not. It's like magnets, right? And these are like the opposing poles or the same poles, and they're getting pushed away. Like, and it's deliberate, because the sector of activism which is pushing WikiLeaks away is their natural allies.
Exactly.
And I agree. And that's by design. It's by design that they're being divorced from each other. So the powers that be are trying to divorce WikiLeaks from its natural support base. And it's working, because the attitudes that are being displayed towards it are so toxic. That it's pushing WikiLeaks towards those who are readily embracing it. So when you have a whole bunch of Trumpistas going, I love WikiLeaks, you're amazing, you're fantastic, let me donate to you, let me share all your stuff because you're wonderful. We all know well and good that when WikiLeaks was leaking on Bush, that hated WikiLeaks, and that when WikiLeaks starts dropping Trump documents left, right, and center, then those people will hate WikiLeaks again. But in the meantime, the left, the so-called left, I feel like they've stolen the left in a lot of ways, actually, because it's not.
They totally usurped it.
Yeah, sure. The co-opted side of the left, the Clintonite faction, the Democratic,
the American neocon left
side of the left. It's offensive to me, because I've been fighting for the left for 6 years, so I don't like calling Hillary Clinton the left. I don't think she's the left. Centre right. She's centre right, but somehow convinced people to allow her to co-opt the left. But anyways, these people have abandoned the basic principles of empathy, and they are not displaying empathy or tolerance, which is what we were always about. We were about empathy and about tolerance. This was the entire purpose of our existence, and all of our actions and every issue we cared about was based on tolerance, diversity, and empathy. well, they've decided that that doesn't include WikiLeaks and that doesn't include Julian Assange. And so, of course, he doesn't want to go anywhere near them with a barge pole. And, of course, he's looking at, the large hordes of friendly supporters thinking, wow, you guys might not be so bad, actually, because you know what? You make us feel a lot better about what we do than, like, these other guys. Yeah. Who wants to get in bed with a hater? I mean, I'm not contradicting myself, because like 2 minutes ago I was just saying it's a spectrum and we should like be able to reach out our hands and across the divide. That's different from actually getting into bed with someone who's actively abusing you, right? Like you would not want to do that. So absolutely. I feel like the people who are slamming the door shut in WikiLeaks' face are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, well, and also I think that establishment Democrat perspective is very much an American phenomenon, because in a lot of Western countries, as far as I'm aware, you're not allowed to have money in politics to the degree that it exists in America and that has been legally upheld in America. And so basically the entirety of the democratic process in America has been completely bought and sold. And that's why you see quote unquote Democrats acting in the way that they do. And I think that that's a pretty American phenomenon, because as you said, in Australia or New Zealand or a lot of other sensical countries, the Democrats in the US are conservative. So,
well, Jen, I mean, to Hillary Clinton, I was just never.
Yeah, no, I remember specifically
how. I mean, people like say Trump's a like fascist, white nationalist, whatever. He could be running around in a clown costume like every weekend, and I wouldn't even be surprised. But not to say he is, but I wouldn't be surprised. But Hillary Clinton her and Bill Clinton have just spent 25 years mass incarcerating black people, that Obama was just deporting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Latinos. Like this idea that Hillary Clinton is less racist, Hillary Clinton who wipes out entire countries, who like took out the entire of Libya like it was nothing, who has murdered millions of women and children and would do so again tomorrow quite happily. The idea that she is any like more or less racist than Trump is just fucking insane. Like, excuse my language, but it's insane. These people are as corrupt as each other. They do not give a shit about anyone. They possess zero empathy and they possess zero tolerance. And the fact that Hillary Clinton gets up and makes a speech that says, we're all the same, diversity, I'm for the Latinos, I'm for the whatever. Like, no, she's not. She doesn't give a shit about them. They're still cleaning her house.
For gay. No, yeah, I know that there was a report at some point where she was employing in prison labor for the governor's mansion in Arkansas when she was first lady. And there's so many stories about that. But I think that, with Clinton and with the establishment Democrats like her, there's this, like when I was during the 2016 election and the general election, the build up to that, I would spend some time wasting time on Twitter debating with pro-Hillary trolls, like in the correct the record type bots. And I kept, the conversation would end with a simple question. And the question would be, can you point out one thing to me that Hillary Clinton is actually liberal on? Like maybe fracking or maybe the banks and I would just go down the list, like point out to me where Hillary is a liberal, and they couldn't answer. And that's when the conversation would end. So.
But liberal has come to mean this hypocrisy.
Yeah.
It has come to mean this hypocrisy. There's a huge, there's a lot of hypocrisy that I'm calling out actually in the article that I'm writing at present, because there are people who are wanting to knock down those who have sacrificed everything and inherit the mantle, but they're not realizing that inheriting the mantle would mean needing to sacrifice everything that they have. And if they cannot get in the headspace of losing everything up to and including potentially their nationality, their citizenship, and their ability to even know if they have a country to live in for the next year, then they are never going to fill the shoes of someone like Julian Assange or be able to ever dream of replacing them, because
Definitely.
the hardships that Julian and others are facing, these guys wouldn't last one day of.
Yeah, and the hypocrisy of humanitarian groups and NGOs that profess to support activists, but yet dismiss people that are either exiled in
It's
Russia.
Yeah, hate, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I started to go off on that in the article, but I didn't have the doc. I want to write a full article about that, because that really, I really become very angry about that topic, you know, for you and people that are in your situation. I think hypocrisy on that level infuriates me almost more than something that's just bold-faced liars like some of this NSA stuff that we've looked at. So
I have a visitor. I'll be right back. A little one.
okay,
We should probably be wrapping up anyway. Thank you for a great stream.
Not a problem. Great. I've had a great time. Thank you for having me read my article. I guess we'll just sign out now. Thank you. I'll talk to you later, Suzie.
Cool. Thanks, guys. You've been awesome as usual. And we'll see you on Tuesday.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.